title of his speech is, "Do you work well under pressure?" Robert Karanja, do you work well under pressure?
Do you work well under pressure? That's a fairly common question in interviews. And while in some organizations, pressure means a toxic environment, you cannot hope to achieve anything of significance without learning how to work under pressure. After all, diamonds are just lumps of coals that thrived under pressure. Over the last few months, I have been watching a lot of videos about aeroplane crashes. And from the analysis of these crashes, I have learned that we as leaders can glean a lot from the decision-making abilities of pilots. They know how to thrive under pressure. This evening, I'm going to talk to you about 3 different areas of pressure that you might face and how to deal with them. Let us start with the first. Get their ITs. Imagine this. You have a private pilot license. One weekend, you invite some of your closest friends for an impromptu trip to Mombasa. You drive to Wilson Airport where your plane is hangared. However, when you get there, you realize that the weather conditions are not conducive for you to fly to Mombasa. At that moment, you're going to face pressure because you do not want to disappoint your friends. You've brought them all the way to the airport, and now you're going to tell them to go back home. Most pilots who end up in crashes, rather than going back home, decide to soldier on despite the bad weather. And it's the same with you as a leader. You make promises to the people around you. However, as time goes by, you find that you cannot keep those promises. Without knowing how to deal with that situation, that pressure can break you down. The best way to deal with that kind of situation is to preempt it. Manage expectations. Before making any kind of promise, and while you are planning, make sure you take into account your skill level and the amount of resources that you have. And when you make a promise and you're not sure, do not be afraid to give conditional promises that you can take back in case things don't turn out as you expected. After you have managed expectations, you might still face challenges. And this brings us to the second type of pressure that you might experience. This is task saturation. The vast number of crashes happen during takeoff and during landing. The reason for this is because during those periods, the pilot has a lot of tasks to accomplish. And because of the number of tasks and the brain cannot deal with all of them, they're likely to overlook important tasks that end up in catastrophe. And it's the same with you as a leader. In the course of doing your work, there are periods when there is a lot to do. There are many demands on your time. During those periods, it is easy for you to let important things fall between the cracks. My advice to you when dealing with that situation is to have a clear set of priorities. Have a hierarchy of importance where you assign a degree of importance to every task that you have. Start with the most important tasks and then slowly work down that hierarchy. In that way, you'll make sure that you always have the most important things right at the forefront and never overlook them. While you might prepare and also prioritize, there are unexpected events that might happen. And this brings us to the third type of pressure that you might experience. This is simply an emergency. The other reason that most aeroplanes crash, pilot-flown aeroplanes crash, is because of moving from VFR conditions to IMC conditions. Let me explain. Most private pilots have been trained to fly in clear skies where they can see clearly all around them. However, sometimes when they're flying, they enter situations that are overcast. These are called IMCs. A pilot who survives that situation is not afraid to ask. They ask for help as soon as possible and also as emphatic as possible. They declare an emergency. When you are a leader, you might find yourself facing unexpected situations. In those circumstances, because of fear of appearing incompetent or weak, you might withhold asking for help. My advice is that when you find yourself in that kind of situation, before you find yourself in that kind of situation, create a support system. People around you that you can easily reach out for help whenever you feel stretched beyond your abilities. Let me conclude. You can thrive under pressure. You can thrive by planning according to your skills and resources. You can thrive by prioritizing your tasks. And finally, you can thrive by creating a support system that you can lean on. So next time you're in an interview and you're asked, do you work well under pressure? Say yes. Then explain using the points that I've given you. And you can thank me after you've gotten the job. Back to you, Mr. Toastmaster.